Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are boarding the fastest, most critical internal pathway in your body, the circulatory and lymphatic systems.
Mm,
We usually think of this network as, life support delivering oxygen, food, immune cells,
yeah,
all that good stuff.
right.
But when a localized infection breaches this internal barrier, the cardiovascular system instantly turns into a superhighway for, well, disaster.
It really does. Yeah. When we study microbial threats, these systems are absolutely central. The circulatory system, heart, vessels, blood, that's the engine, the transport layer,
Right.
and then the lymphatic system, returning fluid, moving immune cells around. It's the direct link between, say, a small localized fight and potentially systemic collapse.
Oh,
People have known blood was important forever. Ancient physicians had their four humors.
right, the humus.
But it wasn't really until William Harvey nailed down the modern concept of circulation back in 1628 that we truly got this idea of an incredible pressurized loop.
And now we understand that this loop is exactly what pathogens are looking for. So our mission today is to unpack the critical clinical picture here.
Okay.
We're diving into infections, attacking the heart structure itself, clarifying the difference between just having a microbe in your blood versus full-blown, life-threatening septic shock.
A crucial distinction.
Definitely. And then reviewing the major enemies, bacterial, viral, fungal, protozoan, that exploit this whole system. #I. Localized infections of the heart structure, the itis trio. Okay, let's start right at the source, the heart. If you could visualize the layers of the heart for us, starting from the inside, there are distinct areas that can get inflamed. The itis trio, as you call it.
Yeah, exactly. First up is endocarditis. That's inflammation of the endocardium, so the inner lining of the heart and particularly the valves.
Okay, the lining and the valves.
And the majority of these cases, they're caused by bacterial or fungal infections. Now, what makes this such a huge clinical challenge often comes down to the type of valve involved.
Ah, you mean like whether it's the patient's own natural valve or a prosthetic replacement? Is that the key?
Precisely, yeah. If it's a natural valve, often, antibiotics can clear it up. But
Right.
if the infection takes hold on a prosthetic valve, things get complicated.
How so?
Well, the body tries to fight it, right? But this response, mixed with the microbes themselves, creates this messy buildup of fibrin and platelets. We call it vegetation.
Vegetation, okay.
And these vegetations, they're tough for antibiotics to penetrate. They cause serious damage to the valve itself. And even worse, if a piece breaks off,
Oh, no.
it becomes like traveling debris. It can cause blockages, strokes, damage elsewhere in the body. That's why these prosthetic infections often end up needing surgery to remove and replace the valve. It's a big deal.
That's a really striking detail, how modern medical materials can inadvertently create a sort of fortress for bacteria.
Okay.
Moving outward from the lining, the next layer is the muscle itself.
Right, the myocardium.
Yeah.
And inflammation there is myocarditis.
Myocarditis. What usually causes that?
This one is primarily caused by viruses or sometimes parasitic infections. Bacteria can do it, but it's less common.
Okay.
And because it affects the muscle, the heart gets weaker. This leads to symptoms that can be kind of vague sometimes. Unexpected chest pain, maybe fatigue or arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats.
So it could be missed easily.
It can fly under the radar, yeah, until it causes really serious problems like heart failure down the line.
Right. And then wrapping the whole heart, there's a protective sac.
Yep, the pericardium. Inflammation of that sac is pericarditis.
Pericarditis.
Like-
Got it. Mostly viral, too.
Usually, yeah. It's often a complication following a viral infection, but it can also happen after things like heart attacks or heart surgery. Causes sharp chest pain, makes it harder for the heart to pump effectively because of that inflammation and friction in the surrounding sac. #tag2, the vocabulary of blood-borne infections.
Okay, now let's talk about the really big danger. When a localized infection like, say, an abscess or maybe a bad wound infection uses that lymphatic drainage system to just dump microbes straight into the bloodstream. It seems really vital to get the language right here because clinicians treat these different stages completely differently, don't they?
Absolutely critical, yeah. So the baseline term is microbemia. This just means microorganisms have managed to enter the circulatory system.
Okay, just their presence.
Right. And this happens more often than you might think. Maybe a tiny breach during like dental work or a small cut. Often it's transient, temporary. You might feel a little chill, slight fever, or maybe nothing at all. You might be totally asymptomatic.
And bacteremia is just a specific type of microbemia where the microbes are bacteria.
Exactly. Bacteremia, bacteria in the blood. Now, the good news is blood itself isn't the greatest place for most pathogens to grow. It's actually relatively poor in nutrients they need, like iron.
Ah, interesting. The iron point.
That's right. Plus, you've got the immune system's cleanup crew constantly patrolling circulating macrophages, the complement system. They usually clear out this bacteremia pretty quickly, pretty efficiently.
Okay, so that's the normal response. But what happens if that fails?
Right. If those defenses get overwhelmed, or if the bacteria are particularly nasty and they start to multiply uncontrollably within the bloodstream, that's septicemia.
Okay, multiplication is the key difference.
Right.
And this is where we hit the panic button in the hospital setting.
This is definitely panic button time.
Yeah.
Septicemia means the infection isn't just present, it's actively colonizing that high-speed highway, the bloodstream.
Got it.
Septicemia is a severe type of sepsis, and it's absolutely a medical emergency. The bacteria multiplying triggers this massive body-wide inflammatory response.
Okay.
And the catastrophic end stage of that process is septic shock.
Septic shock.
This means the systemic inflammation has caused the blood vessels to leak and dilate so much that the blood pressure just plummets, dangerously low. And it stays low even when doctors are pumping the patient full of IV fluids.
Wow.
We are talking about mortality rates that can climb as high as 50%. It's essentially the circulatory system collapsing under the strain. Pretty scary.
Extremely scary. That clarification between bacteremia and septicemia is so important. Tag 3. Key bacterial diseases affecting the system. All right, let's focus on a couple of specific bacterial infections now that really show how pathogens, or maybe the body's reaction to them, can go fully systemic. Let's start with the rheumatic fever. This one's fascinating because the real damage isn't directly from the bacteria, but from our own immune system kind of making a mistake.
That's exactly right. Yeah, rheumatic fever is a rare inflammatory complication that happens after an untreated group A strep infection. So think strep throat or scarlet fever that wasn't properly dealt with.
Okay, it's a delayed reaction.
It is. What happens is the immune system makes antibodies to fight the strep bacteria, which is good. But sometimes those antibodies mistakenly cross-react. They start attacking the body's own tissues.
Which tissues?
Specifically, heart valves are a major target, also joints, the brain, skin. You get this whole constellation of problems: carditis, arthritis, neurological issues, rashes.
So it's a systemic inflammation triggered by that initial, maybe localized strep infection. And this explains why long-term antibiotic use is sometimes necessary.
Yes, exactly. Often long-term treatment isn't just about clearing any lingering strep, but it's really crucial to prevent the fever from recurring, because each recurrence can cause more and more damage, potentially leading to severe permanent heart problems years later.
Right, protecting the heart valves long-term. Okay, shifting gears completely now to tissue death. Let's talk about gangrene. This is tissue death, necrosis, right? Caused by ischemia, basically, restricted blood flow, often from an injury or maybe vascular disease.
Correct. When that blood supply gets cut off or severely restricted, the tissue becomes starved of oxygen. It creates this perfect, dark, oxygen-free, anaerobic environment. And this is just paradise for certain bacteria like Clostridium perfringens. These guys are gram-positive, they form tough endospores, and they hate oxygen. They thrive in these ischemic conditions. They're often found in soil, in the environment.
And that restricted blood flow also means that trying to treat it with systemic antibiotics pills, or IV, is tough because the drugs can't easily reach the site.
Exactly. The medicine can't get to where the problem is. Now, the source material defines 4 types: dry, internal, wet, and gas gangrene. The key mechanism, though, is that ischemia. Dry gangrene is mainly just the ischemia itself, but the wet and gas forms definitely involve active infection.
Gas gangrene sounds particularly bad.
It is perhaps the most dramatic, yeah.
Yeah.
The Clostridium bacteria actually produce gas bubbles right there within the dying tissue. You can sometimes feel it crackling under the skin.
Oh, wow.
And because antibiotics struggle to penetrate that ischemic dead tissue, the treatment has to be really aggressive. Usually surgical removal, debridement of all the dead tissue is essential, and sometimes hyperbaric oxygen therapy is used.
Hyperbaric oxygen, putting the patient in a high-pressure oxygen chamber.
Right. The idea is to flood the tissues with high concentrations of oxygen, which is toxic to those strict anaerobes like Clostridium, #tag zoonotic, and vector-transmitted bacterial diseases.
Okay, now we enter this whole other category. Diseases that use animals or insects as intermediaries. We're talking about zoonosis diseases, transmitted from vertebrate animals to humans. This relationship between species, environment, and human health.
Hmm.
It makes sense why that field of conservation medicine is becoming so important.
Absolutely. It really connects the dots between human health, animal health, and the health of the environment they share. Look at brucellosis, for example, sometimes called undulant fever.
Undulant fever.
Yeah, because the fever tends to rise and fall. It comes from Brucella species. People often get it from handling infected animals' livestock, usually, or consuming unpasteurized dairy products. Causes these chronic, recurring flu-like symptoms can go on for a long time.
Right. Then there's tularemia, also known as rabbit fever, caused by Francisella tularensis.
Ah, yes, tularemia.
This one is notoriously infectious, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you only need a tiny amount to get sick.
Extremely infectious.
Yeah.
We're talking an infective dose of maybe just 10 to 50 organisms. It's transmitted typically by rabbits, squirrels, other rodents, or sometimes biting insects like ticks or deer flies.
And because it's so infectious, the CDC actually lists it as a potential bioterrorism agent, right? Even though it doesn't usually spread person to person.
That's correct. The low infectious dose makes it a concern. And, well, we absolutely cannot discuss diseases of the circulatory system, especially bacterially transmitted ones, without mentioning the plague.
The Black Death, Yersinia pestis.
Yersinia pestis, classically transmitted by fleas that have fed on infected rodents, rats, prairie dogs, squirrels.
Plague is kind of the ultimate example of a localized infection just exploding systemically, often with terrifying speed. There are different forms, right?
Yes, three main forms. First is bubonic plague. This is where the bacteria get trapped in the lymph nodes, usually near the flea bite. The nodes swell up massively, become incredibly painful. These swollen nodes are the buboes.
Okay, that's the localized form.
Primarily, yes. But then you can get septicemic plague. This happens if the bacteria bypass the lymph nodes or break out from them and get directly into the bloodstream. They multiply rapidly in the blood.
So that's straight to the superhighway.
Straight to the highway. And the third form, arguably the most feared, is pneumonic plague. This is when the bacteria are carried to the lungs, either from the bubonic or septicemic form, or potentially inhaled directly.
And this form can spread between people.
Yes. Pneumonic plague can be spread person to person through respiratory droplets, like coughing. And if treatment isn't started extremely quickly, like within 24 hours of symptoms, the mortality rate approaches 100%.
That's terrifying. Okay, let's touch on a couple more, particularly relevant here in the U.S., carried by ticks. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, or RMSF.
Yes. Caused by Rickettsia rickettsii, transmitted by several species of ticks.
This one's known for being severe, and the key thing is speed of treatment, right? Even before the classic rash shows up.
Absolutely crucial. RMSF can progress very rapidly. Treatment with the right antibiotic, usually doxycycline, needs to start based on clinical suspicion alone, often before lab tests confirm it or the characteristic spotted rash appears. That rash can be delayed, or sometimes it doesn't even show up clearly. Delays in treatment can be fatal.
Got it. Early suspicion, treat immediately. And the other big one, Lyme disease.
Lyme. Caused by the Spirochete bacterium Borrelia burgdorferi, transmitted by the black-legged tick, sometimes called the deer tick.
The classic early sign everyone knows is that bullseye rash, erythema migrans.
Right, that expanding red ring. Though it's important to remember, not everyone who gets Lyme develops that rash, or they might not notice it.
Okay.
And if Lyme disease isn't treated early, typically with antibiotics, it can progress from that initial skin stage to affect other parts of the body over weeks, months, or even years, causing problems in the joints, the heart, and the nervous system. Hashtag V, viral, fungal, and protozoan threats.
All right. Let's shift gears now to the non-bacterial threats that also use the circulatory system as their route. Starting with viruses. We have some famous ones that like to hide out in our circulating cells, the latent viruses.
We do indeed. Take infectious mononucleosis, often called mono or the kissing disease, caused by the Epstein-Barr virus, EBZ, which is actually a type of herpes virus, HHV4.
Okay.
It primarily targets B lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell. Causes the classic symptoms: really bad sore throat, fatigue, swollen lymph nodes, fever. Usually self-limiting, but the key point is that EBV establishes latency. It hides out in your B cells for life.
For life, wow. And its cousin, Cytomegalovirus or CMV, does something similar?
Very similar. CMV, or a human herpes virus 5, HHV5, also establishes latency, typically in leukocytes, other white blood cells. Now, for most healthy people, CMV infection is harmless, maybe mild symptoms or none at all, but it becomes a very severe threat for people with weakened immune systems, think transplant patients, HIV patients, and maybe most tragically, it's a major risk for unborn children if the mother gets infected during pregnancy. CMV is a leading infectious cause of developmental disabilities and hearing loss in newborns.
That's incredibly serious.
Yeah.
We also need to touch on the viral hemorrhagic fevers, or VHFs. Things like Ebola come to mind.
Right. VHFs are caused by viruses from 4 distinct RNA virus families. Filoviruses like Ebola and Marburg are probably the most infamous.
What defines them? Is it just the fever?
The fever is part of it, but the defining characteristic is the damage they inflict on the vascular system itself. They disrupt the body's ability to regulate itself, damage blood vessels, and often lead to widespread bleeding or hemorrhaging.
And these tend to be geographically restricted, right?
Yeah.
Because of their hosts?
Generally, yes. They often rely on specific animal or insect reservoirs, rodents, bats, mosquitoes, ticks, so their natural occurrence is limited to certain areas. But they are incredibly dangerous pathogens. They require handling in the highest level of biocontainment, biosafety level 4 or BSL-4 facilities like those at the CDC. They always warrant extreme caution.
Absolutely. Okay, moving from viruses to fungi. Systemic mycoses, these are fungal infections that spread through the body.
That's right. Fungi can enter the body in various ways and hailed into the lungs through the GI tract, maybe through a break in the skin, and then, yes, they can use the bloodstream to spread systemically.
Who is most at risk here?
The most critical point with systemic fungal infections is the target population. It's overwhelmingly the immunocompromised.
Okay, same group as with CMV.
Exactly. Patients with HIV/AIDS, cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy, organ transplant recipients on immunosuppressive drugs, these are the individuals at highest risk. And it's tough because fungi are eukaryotes, like our own cells.
Right, makes treatment difficult.
Very difficult. The antifungal drugs we have can be quite toxic to human cells too. So, unfortunately, for these vulnerable populations, systemic fungal infections are often fatal even with aggressive treatment.
A really challenging area. Okay, finally, let's tackle the complexity of protozoan infections. Again, these are eukaryotes, so that treatment challenge persists.
It certainly does. Many of the drugs that kill protozoa can also harm our own cells, making treatment tricky and sometimes toxic.
The biggest example globally has to be malaria, right? The most common vector-borne disease worldwide.
By far, caused by protozoan parasites of the genus Plasmodium, transmitted by the bite of an infected female Anopheles mosquito.
Can you walk us through the basic life cycle, just verbally? How does it cause illness?
Sure. So the mosquito injects sporozoites when it bites you. These travel straight to your liver. This is the silent phase, the exoerythrocytic stage. They multiply in the liver cells, but you don't feel sick yet.
Okay, silent liver stage first.
Right. Then, after maturing, they burst out of the liver cells and invade your red blood cells. This is the blood stage, the erythrocytic stage. Inside the red blood cells, they multiply again, eventually becoming merozoites.
Merozoites.
When the infected red blood cell ruptures, it releases these merozoites, which then infect new red blood cells. And it's this cycle, the rupture of red blood cells and release of parasites and waste products, that causes the characteristic symptoms of malaria. The waves of fever, chills, sweating.
The rupture is the key to the symptoms. And malaria can be quite severe.
It ranges. It can be uncomplicated, meaning you feel awful, but it's not immediately life-threatening. Or it can progress to severe malaria, which can involve things like cerebral malaria, when parasites clog vessels in the brain, severe anemia, respiratory distress, kidney failure, cardiovascular collapse. It's a major killer globally.
Definitely. And the chapter mentions a couple of other protozoan examples.
Yes, briefly. Toxoplasmosis, caused by Toxoplasma gondii. The definitive host is the cat. Humans usually get infected by ingesting oocysts from cat feces, like cleaning litter box or eating undercooked meat containing tissue cysts.
Generally okay for healthy people, but a risk for it.
A huge risk for fetuses if a woman acquires the infection for the first time during pregnancy. It can cause severe birth defects. Also dangerous for immunocompromised individuals.
Right. And Chagas disease.
Chagas disease is caused by Trypanosoma cruzi. It's found primarily in the Americas, transmitted by insects called reduvid bugs, sometimes known as kissing bugs, because they often bite near the mouth.
Okay. What are the long-term effects?
The acute phase might be mild or asymptomatic, but decades later, a significant percentage of infected people develop chronic problems, most notably severe cardiac complications, like an enlarged heart, heart failure, and arrhythmias. It can also affect the digestive system. The long-term damage can be irreversible. #outro.
Wow. This deep dive has really, really underscored the dual nature of the circulatory system, hasn't it? It's absolutely essential for life, but it's also the perfect superhighway for pathogens to spread rapidly and cause systemic disease.
It really is, and that potential for rapid spread is precisely why the terminology is so clinically important. Knowing that bacteremia might just be a transient blip the body handles, while septicemia signifies a failure of those defenses and demands immediate aggressive intervention. Understanding the heart structure, the potential infection sites there, and also the unique life cycles and transmission routes of things like plague, malaria, Lyme disease. It's all essential knowledge for anyone in healthcare.
Absolutely. We've covered the heart structure, the crucial vocabulary of blood infections, and the major microbial players, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa. Thinking about the diseases tied to specific animal or insect hosts, those zoonotic and vector-borne diseases, that leads to a final thought for you, our listener. Considering these diseases like plague, Lyme, malaria, maybe even VHFs.
What specific characteristic of these vector-borne diseases, perhaps their reliance on a particular animal host or their traditional geographic limits or how they're transmitted, makes them potentially most vulnerable to being dramatically affected, maybe spread or changed, by factors like increased global travel and ongoing climate change?
That's a really powerful and timely question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this exploration helps you connect these concepts and apply this critical knowledge.